looks like we lost another one last night. We have lost 30 chicks. This is the worst batch of chicks I have ever experienced. It's just a disaster. Let's go see if we lost any chicks last night. It's a pretty cold morning, so I'm a little bit worried. Yep, looks like we lost another one last night. These are Cornish cross broilers, and this is the worst batch of chicks I have ever experienced. We ordered about 60 of them, and I haven't counted them recently, but I think we're probably close to 30 now. So we have lost 30 chicks. And the thing about this is that we've kept the heat lamp on them, we've kept them well fed, we've kept the water in there, I've given them apple cider vinegar, we have given them everything they need. And what's happened is, every night we've lost a couple. Now, for the last 4 days, I would say, the death has kind of subsided, except the one we just lost today. But honestly, it's a little understandable because a couple of these chicks aren't fully feathered. They're a little bit smaller. You see that we have some really big ones and we have some really small ones. Now, in my experience, it's common to have some that are bigger than others and some that are a little bit smaller, but the difference in these chicks is pretty big, and this isn't a straight run, meaning that there's not female and males. This is only males, only roosters, and so they should all be pretty much around the same size. Now, I've turned the heat lamp off for probably the last 4 days, which most of them will all survive. We haven't had any death in the last 4 days except the one we just had today, and it's a little understandable because last night it got down to about 58 degrees, but for the most part, the ones that are healthy in this group have actually fully feathered out, and I'm gonna go ahead and show you the size difference in these guys. Now here's the difference, and I don't know if you can tell. See, this guy fully feathered out, looks really nice, very large. And then we have a chick like this who still looks like a baby chick, isn't fully feathered out, and just totally falling behind the group. But today, even though we're having issues, we're gonna go put these guys on grass. I wanna get them out there. I wanna get them out of here. These chicks are almost a month old, if you can believe it. And we shouldn't be having issues like this. And thankfully, like I said, the last 4 days, the death has kind of stopped. Hopefully, we don't have any more issues, but I think when I put these chicks out, we're probably gonna end up losing a couple others. Probably some of the ones that are smaller, and I'm not gonna keep chicks behind. So I figured I should explain what I think's going on here, and I actually had a really long conversation with a very nice lady at Hoover Hatchery because I've never had this problem. Now, if you've raised Cornish cross, you know that you're gonna have some loss. It's pretty common to lose a few the first couple days, and then even sometimes once they get too big, they can have a heart attack. Every time you raise chicks, it's a little different because, you know, you can be raising meat birds, which aren't very hardy. You can be raising egg layers, which are a lot hardier. You can be raising something like our New Hampshire birds, which we did this last year, that are a lot hardier. We didn't lose a single New Hampshire when they were chicks or anything. But these Cornish cross, they just aren't bred like that. They're not bred to be hardy. They're bred to grow really quick and have really good meat production. You can expect to lose maybe even 10% of your group of chicks. So I called Hoover Hatchery and spoke to a very nice lady there and just explained the situation on how we, had lost one in shipping, which is normal, and then we lost, 1 or 2 the next couple days, which was totally normal. And then what ended up happening was over those next 3 weeks, we were losing 1 or 2 chicks almost every single night. And what I was noticing was we would have, all the chicks would look healthy, no issues, everybody was eating and drinking, and I was giving them apple cider vinegar to try and boost their immune system. And then we would have 2 chicks that would drop to the ground and would kind of lay there all day long. They wouldn't really get up very much. They were still alive. And then the next day, those chicks would be dead, and we would have 2 more chicks who looked healthy the day before on the ground, and we were just repeating that process. Healthy looking chicks ending up on the ground the next day being dead. And I couldn't really figure out what was going on. I was looking up all the symptoms and I was treating them for everything, and nothing really got better until I finally had to make the decision. And this may sound horrible, but all the chicks that were on the ground, I decided to just put out of their misery, get rid of them, try and get rid of any sick chicks that I saw in the group, which was on that day, it was only 2 of them. Because what I thought was happening was we were getting some sort of sickness, whether it was pneumonia or what is it, coccytis, I don't know how to pronounce that, but I'll put it right here. I wasn't sure if maybe we were getting a sickness and it was, you know, a chick would get sick and then it would pass to the next chicks and then the next chicks and that sort of thing. So I just wanted to knock it out, get rid of it, and that actually worked great. We didn't have any issues. I think the chick we just lost last night was probably one that was falling behind, that was a little bit weaker, and, you know, it got a little too cold for them. So that's understandable. I understand losing chicks like that, but losing 2 or 3 every single night like that, that is not common. And the lady at Hoover Hatchery said the exact same thing. She said, I've never really seen this before. It's not very common for this to happen. And she said really the only thing that she can think of is that when they were getting shipped, they might have been left out. The day that they were shipped, it was pretty cold, so they could have been left out, could have got pneumonia, and they could have just been passing it on to each other, one after the other. And, you know, what can you do? So they were really nice. I love Hoover Hatchery. I love working with them, and she decided to ship me out 35 new chicks, which really isn't common, you know? I mean, they could have said, well, it's been 3 weeks, it's your fault, you know, you're doing everything wrong, and they didn't. They shipped us out new chicks, and I really appreciate that. So thank you to Hoover Hatchery for all the support. We have the 35 replacement chicks coming tomorrow, and then in 2 weeks, we have some Red Rangers from Murray McMurray Hatchery coming. So we need to free up this brooder. And honestly, by 4 weeks, these chicks need to be out of the brooder and in the chicken tractors, eating the grass. And I think it's going to help out. We may lose a couple because they may be a little weak and it might be a little cold, but I think it's going to be better in the long run because we're going to be moving them every day. The sickness is going to stay behind, and it's just going to be a much better process. So let's go ahead and move these chicks to the chicken tractors. I don't have one of those fancy poultry boxes that you see Justin Rhodes and all them have. I'm just going to be using a cardboard box. Well, I think we maxed out our box. Let's go ahead and move these guys first. The grass got pretty thick in here since last time I mowed. I'm gonna throw them in here in this jungle, but I'm gonna mow in front of them and we'll move them along right after I do that. Let's go grab the rest. Well, I counted 31 chicks. That's a huge loss. 29 chicks is what we've lost so far. And we're only halfway through. I don't think these guys are gonna be ready by 8 weeks. That's 1 month out. They are so far behind compared to where 4-week-old Cornish cross usually are. But we'll just have to wait and see. There's some small ones, there's some big ones. Who knows, maybe they'll bounce back pretty quick. We'll have to see. You might be asking yourself, why am I throwing them out here in these chicken tractors if some of them are sick or if they're falling behind? And it's because this is the healthiest place for them. You know, they get sunlight every day, they get these nice greens, and then they get moved every single day. This is just gonna be the healthiest environment compared to having to put a bunch of wood chips in a tiny brooder. I think that, you know, like I said, I think we're gonna lose a couple because maybe they're too young to be out here or they're too weak to be out here. But at the end of the day, it's gonna happen regardless. We're gonna lose them in the brooder, we're gonna lose them out here. I think for the group of Cornish cross, this is gonna be a much better environment for them. But as you can see, this is a bit of a jungle. I think we're losing a couple in the jungle here. So let's go get the zero turn, get some of this mowed, and we'll move them along. So that way the grass is a little bit shorter. We'll get them water, we'll get them food, make sure they're all well taken care of. a little bit better. These guys can walk in here just fine. And they're going right for all the bugs and all the greens on the ground. And I think this is gonna be a much healthier environment for them. Now that we got them set up here, we need to get them some water, and we need to get them some food. As you probably know, we mix all of our own egg layer feed, and with our meat birds, we're feeding them a 30% protein ration. I think it's gonna be really nice. I'm interested to see how they grow out. I'm not gonna account for this group of birds, but on our next 35 we're getting for the Cornish cross, and then our next 30 that we're getting for our Red Rangers, it'll be really interesting to see how quickly they grow out. But this is our grain mill because we're feeding whole grains to our egg layers. These chicks are a little too small to be eating those whole grains. If I soak them, they will eat some of them. I've noticed that they're not big fans of the whole oats, so we bought this grain mill. This thing's awesome. I can put a lot of grain in there. I can put corn, soybean, I can ground pretty much anything, and I can turn it anywhere from a flour into a really, really coarse grind. And so this is what we've been using to grind up all of our feed, and that's what we're gonna do today. So this is our whole oat feed, and this is our 30% ration. So we're gonna toss this in the mill, and we're gonna grind it up. I've found a really nice consistency for their feed. I don't want it to be too small. I don't want it to be flour, but I also don't want it to be too big. And so this is just the right amount. It cracks almost all of the oats. It cracks the corn really, really small. And I think it makes a really nice feed. This is pretty much, this looks a lot nicer than what you would see at the store if you're buying like a crumble, but this is some really good feed for them. It's gonna be really healthy, and it's gonna be the right size for them. We'll go ahead and get a few scoops of this for them. Now the joy of them being on grass is that they're gonna eat a lot of the grass. They're not gonna eat as much of this, and they're gonna eat a lot of bugs, and it's gonna be a really healthy environment for them. Now for most chicks, they're gonna free range really well, and this feed right here would just be a supplement for their diet. But for the Cornish cross, they need this. This is their main diet, and really the grass and the bugs, that's their supplemental diet. So if you didn't have this for them, they're probably not gonna grow very quickly. They're probably gonna have some health issues. If you're looking for a mixed feed, I really recommend it. Corn, wheat, soybean meal, really good feed. And when they're not out in the field eating the greens and the bugs, I'll even grind up some fly larvae for them, so that way they have some sort of other protein other than grain. Oh, and if you wanted to know, this isn't a sponsored video, but this is by Every Grow. Wonderful product. I'm really enjoying it so far. I was on Amazon and online on Google trying to figure out which grain mill I wanted to buy. I didn't want to spend a ton of money, but this thing is perfect. It's everything that I was hoping it would be, and so far so good. So if you're looking for one, Every Grow, found it on Amazon, probably somewhere around, I think it was about $250. We've got our water. We're gonna put a splash of apple cider vinegar in here, so that way it boosts their immune system. These guys haven't been trained on this watering system, but they usually get it pretty quick. They hit it with their head, and then they start pecking at it to get that water. Once one of them gets it, they usually all fall in line. Thank you to Hoover Hatchery for sending us 35 more chicks. Man, what a company. They could have just said, well, it was after the 48 hours, no problem. And she said, well, I'm actually gonna send you more than you need, just in case a few more go down. So thank you so much to Hoover Hatchery, but we are getting those 35 more chicks tomorrow. possibly today, but most likely tomorrow morning at about 6 a.m. is when I get that call most of the time. So I want to put a good layer of wood chips over the top of this so any sickness or anything stays down there, and we can get the water cleaned up, get some feed in there, get the heat lamp set up, so that way when I got to get those chicks at 6 a.m. all tired and whatnot, I can just toss them in here and they're ready to go. If you don't feel like spending a ton of money, this is a lot like the feeders we have in the chicken tractors, but all this is a 3 or 4 inch pipe cut in half. You put wood to block off the ends, and then put another piece of wood for legs to keep it up off the ground a little bit. And then this is kind of optional, but I like it. It's not only just a handle, it actually keeps the chicks from sitting inside the feed so that they don't poop in it, and it keeps it a lot cleaner. Now, you still get some wood shavings because they'll kick everything up, but it's a lot easier to just pull the wood shavings out. It's the poop you want to keep out of there. This right here is just some 2x4s, and this keeps the water off the ground. Otherwise, they'll kick their wood chips in it, it'll soak up all the water, and it won't work properly. Well, we got our heat lamp, we got our homemade feeder, and we got our little giant automatic waterer on a platform. And of course, the most important part, we got a thick layer of wood chips. I probably put down 4 or 5 inches just because I want all of that sickness to be way at the bottom. I don't want it to affect the new batch. Hopefully we have better luck with this new batch, but we'll check in once we get them. We just got 35 more Cornish cross chicks from Hoover Hatchery. Let's get them out of the box, make sure they're all alive, get them comfortable in the brooder. When I grab the chicks, I like to dip their beaks in the water so they know where it's at. Well, we have all 35. We did not lose a single chick, so that is awesome. These little guys are so cute when they're a few days old. When they're at about 8 weeks at butcher weight, they are ugly. They usually figure out where their food and water is pretty quick. Well, I show them the water, they figure out where the food's at, and most of them just end up huddling over by the heat lamp. Let's hope this round of chicks goes a lot better. I'll obviously keep you guys updated as we continue to make videos over the next week. It's the next day. We need to check on the group of chicks we just got, and we need to check on the group of chicks we put in the chicken tractor. Well, it looks like these guys are doing great. They are all skittish and awake, which is good. Looks like they're eating their feed really well, drinking their water, and I don't see anybody dead. That's good news. Now we need to go check on the sick chicks. It got a little cold last night. Now these guys are about 4 weeks, so I shouldn't need to put a heat lamp on them, but they've been sick, they've been having issues, so let's go check on them. Oh man, I think I see 4 that died. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's a bummer. Still don't really know what the problem was with these chicks. It did get to, I think, 58 degrees last night or something, which for 4-week-old chicks, 4-week-old Cornish cross shouldn't be an issue. Shoot, our first batch of Cornish cross we raised in Washington State, and that was in the late fall that we were raising them, and so it was starting to cool down a lot, and we put them out on a chicken tractor at 2.5 weeks with no heat lamp, and we maybe only lost a couple. One around that time we put them out, and then one later on when we were getting ready to butcher. This really is one of the major reasons why I'm not a big fan of Cornish cross. There's nothing that can beat the meat quality and the growth rate of a Cornish cross, but you do have other options. You don't have to have Cornish cross that are constantly dying, constantly getting sick, easily getting sick and easily dying. Last year we raised New Hampshire birds and they were taking a little too long to raise for us, and when it came time to eat them, some of the roosters were a little bit stringy because they were older. If you've had rooster meat, especially older rooster meat, you know that, well, it gets a little stringy, and it's good for soups and anything that, you know, you're soaking in water and cooking in water, it's really good. But if you're trying to have like a grilled chicken or a chicken sandwich, it's a little hard. It still tastes good, but doesn't make for the best texture of chicken. Now, these Cornish cross, this is what you buy at the store. This is that really thick, really big breast chicken. They make really good meat. Sadly, this is the downside to having a bird that's a hybrid that is completely bred to have really big chunks of meat. The 30 that are coming in 2 weeks are actually Red Rangers, which is a Freedom Ranger. It's basically the red version of a Cornish cross that's a lot hardier. From what I've heard, better meat quality, tastier meat. Now that's just what I've heard. I'm not too sure. We're gonna have to test that this year. Those Red Rangers we're getting, they butcher at about 12 weeks, whereas these guys are about 8 weeks. Now this group of Cornish cross that have been sick and dying all the time and having tons of issues, I guarantee you that not many of these guys are gonna be ready to butcher at 8 weeks. Whoever does survive, I'm sure they're gonna be pretty far behind. But that other group, hopefully they butcher at 8 weeks. Hopefully we don't have any issues. They honestly look a lot healthier than these guys did when I first got them. We didn't lose anybody on this new batch. We did lose 2 in shipping with this batch from about a month ago. So always a bummer to have any dead livestock, any dead animals. Aside from it being really sad, it's an investment, you know, and you spend money on livestock, and you know, these guys are obviously for meat, and at some point they will die, but it's always sad when their life ends at a point where it wasn't supposed to. That's part of farming. You live and you learn, and hopefully these Red Rangers turn out really well, because I would personally rather have a chicken that takes a little bit longer, is a lot hardier, and doesn't have as many issues, and maybe even tastes better than something like this where it's just a disaster. There's so many benefits to raising your chickens in a mobile coop like this, especially your meat birds. I would say the main benefit is that these birds aren't meant to only eat grain. They're made to eat greens, eat bugs, scratch the ground, be out in the environment, be out in the sun, be on soil. And really the main benefit of this mobile chicken coop is that you get to move it every single day. And when these chickens are a little bit older, we'll actually move them twice a day. So that way they have new ground they're on, they have new greens to eat, new bugs, they're on new soil. For this group, I think it's really important that we move them every day, because we'll leave the sickness of yesterday behind them, and every day is a new piece of ground. It'll make for a much healthier environment for them. And of course, it's a little bit more work. I have to come out here every day and move the chicks, and when they're this young, we raise up the coop, and there's such a big gap at the bottom that half the chicks end up going out the back end, and I have to go run around and catch them and put them back in. And even though it's a little bit more work, it is a lot better for their health. It is a lot better quality meat, and you're giving them a much better life during their very short life, but you are giving them a much better life, which is important to us. And obviously I can hop in my truck, go drive down to Kroger. I can go buy a whole chicken for $5 or $6, or if I want organic, I can spend, you know, $15 to $20. But even with the chicken you buy at the store, you really aren't sure where it comes from. If you're not buying organic and you're not buying pasture raised, it's probably not high quality chicken. It's probably never lived this sort of life. And honestly, even if you buy organic, that just means they were fed organics. That doesn't mean that they were raised on grass. That doesn't mean that they were moved every single day. Most of the time, they're still in cages. They're still living a very small life. But out here, these guys have a huge world, and this really is the best way to do it, especially for your meat birds, because you're gonna get a much higher quality of meat. And the joy of these chicken tractors is that they can free range without having to deal with all the predators, because these guys are just complete prey. Hawks and weasels and raccoons and anything will kill these birds. It's ridiculous. Obviously, even just a little sickness can kill a lot of birds for us. We're in basically a big, huge wire mesh, you know, movable coop here, and there's nothing that can get in. The only way anything can get them is if they dug underneath, but we move it every single day, so I've never had that problem, never heard of anybody having that problem. So if you're looking to get meat chickens and raise your own chicken, this is how I would do it. Now, there's so many different ways to move them along. You don't have to have a big mobile coop like this. There's so many different kinds. There's many cheaper kinds. This one usually costs about $250 to $300 to build, depending on what kind of wheel system you want to install. But once you have it, it's all paid for. You don't have to pay for a new one every single year. Anything you do have to repair is probably going to be that bottom board that sits on the ground, but depending on where you store it, if you store it out of the weather, it'll last a lot longer. If you raise it up in the wintertime and keep the boards off the ground, it'll last a really long time. Well, that's probably where I'm gonna leave it today. There's always something going on the farm, on the homestead. There's always some little problem arising. It's just part of life. Things get sick, things die, and sometimes it's not picture perfect, but these guys are happy out here. Hopefully the next 2 batches of chicks go a lot better than this batch did, and we are gonna make sure we keep them far away from this batch. But thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and we'll see you in the next one.